physics video and such. Hopefully that's where it is. Anyway, so more on our interferometers. So I actually learned something on the subject, and it's just all kind of curious. So here you just see a piece of glass on top of another bigger piece of glass, and you can see these bar patterns created. And the idea is that there's a layer of dust on the glass, and it's creating a wedge, and the light is reflecting between the layer, the air layer, and creating the pattern. And so this sort of fits with what I was talking about with the consistent dark line size anyway. You can sort of see that the dark lines look rather consistent. But we'll play some of the video, and you might be able to figure out what I'm talking about.
This little piece, if I may, touch it. I will change the thickness between them.
If we shine white light on it, will we get a rainbow?
Ah, good. Next good question. See, because right now, we started with single wavelength, single thickness. Now I got a wedge. Now, let's do multiple colors. But there it is. In fact, maybe I'll even change the whole dust pattern by just picking it up and dropping it again. Oops.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
There we go.
Alright, so now you see a lot more lines, and that's because it's actually higher, not lower. So there's a greater distance, a little layer of air and dust, air technically, between the two layers of the glass, and the light is reflecting at certain distances. So you can just sort of figure when light's refracting through the glass, that it does so at angles. And so it can only be positive, it can only leave the glass at certain distances apart. So you automatically have these bars where light can't possibly pop out at that angle. So this gets sort of back to Newton's rings, and the consistency is being forced by the thickness of the glass is deciding how many of these happen and how wide. The more the distance, well, I guess I might as well draw that part. So we'll go back to drawing. Sorry. I'll try to do a better job than the usual, but we'll see. It'll probably just be the usual job. So the idea is this glass is angled. So this is your interferometer glass, and it has a certain, I would suspect that in most cases the reflective layer is between two layers of glass, and so this might just have to do with reflections in between in the layer that has the silvering in it. But the silvering might just be on one side. But the point sort of is that when the light's coming back on its return trip, so the best way to draw it, I don't know what the best way to draw it is. It's reflecting inside of this layer, and that's what's creating the bars that are seen. So there's no, the traditional view is that you have your beam splitter, and that the two beams of light from the two directions come in and they combine into one beam, and the idea is that somehow they're interfering with each other between here and the target. Somewhere in this empty space is where the two beams are combined. That's the traditional view, as if they're spreading, one beam doing this, and the other beam is, doing some other thing, and they're doing their wave interference kind of crap in here in the space. And clearly where it's happening is right here in the beam splitter, thin film, whatever you want to call it, the piece of glass. Yeah, the complex piece of glass. So this also explains another part of interferometers that I found curious. What really got me thinking about this and looking for it was when I'm using just the film, you know, oh, geez, can't even think of the word. Anyway, the diffracting film. You get these dots that show up spaced apart, and it's really only like, you only need like 3 inches of distance to create a pretty wide pattern. So it's a very short amount of distance, so you have a huge amount of divergence in the light. And I was thinking about that with this experiment, is that the divergence itself would spread it so much that you wouldn't be getting much. If it was a 2-slit experiment, you're losing too much because it diverges so much. So so I just was thinking about the thin film of the diffraction gradient, that it spreads so quickly that how could divergence caused by diffraction possibly be the explanation for the interference pattern, because it spreads too quickly, too fast and too much. So something else had to be the explanation. So another traditional problem with the experiment, so I'll just draw the paths, and then it comes back this way, and then the two are mixed here. So the idea is when this is supposed to be off, you have to say, where does the light go? Because you know the light doesn't go nowhere, even though they think that way. It's not really light plus light equals dark. It's photons just don't go there. And where they're really going is back this way. And so this one's on. So whenever this pattern's off, this pattern's on, and vice versa. So they have exactly the opposite pattern. So whatever you see as a pattern in one side, you'll see exactly the opposite pattern on the other side, because they're just showing you the other image, the reverse image. So they're just reverse images of each other. And clearly that couldn't happen if the decision to interfere was happening out here. So if there was 2 waves interfering with each other out here, clearly the decision had to be made here for the light to be able to go this way for the on. So you can't really have a cancellation that tells this side what to do, you know, after the fact. So the cause and effect rules, if you believe in cause and effect, you know that all the causes and all the effects have to happen here, because you can't go backwards to make this pattern match this one appropriately. Now the other trick to this, the other circumstance that makes it interesting is that so the idea is it's also the idea of the dust thing, right? It was a little piece of dust here and a big piece here, is that there's really a slope, and that the slope is what creates more pattern somehow, and I haven't quite figured out why that would be, more reflections between the layers. So again, this is all just about layers. So it's about going from one medium to another medium, and when you go from a denser medium to a less dense medium, everything stays in phase. But when you go from a less dense to a more dense, that is when you're going through the glass the first time, the fact is that you'll change the phase on the reflection. So the reflection will have a phase shift when that happens. So if it's a pure reflection, there'll be a phase shift. So the phase shift, in my opinion, is just a consequence that the reflection isn't really a reflection, it's a U-turn. And that's taking up one. So for the light to reflect the way it's reflecting inside, which is probably some sort of, you know, it's doing some kind of U-turn kind of reflection. and that's using up time. So the phase was like this, it changes to this because it used up this time doing the U-turn. So that's why there's a phase difference. So that's another key thing here, is you have to be aware that every time there's a transition from a denser, less dense medium to a more dense medium, there's a phase shift in wherever the reflection is. So if it doesn't reflect on the surface, it goes through, it will phase shift on the reflection. But there's always going to be a phase shift on that wherever that line goes, even if it bounces a few hundred times, wherever it finally goes out, whether it goes out here or there, it's going to be phase shifted from the original. You know, a half wavelength, or yeah. That's something also to keep in mind in terms of counting how many layers everything's traveling through, and recognizing that every time there's a transition from the lighter medium to the denser medium, there's got to be a phase shift regardless of which way the light goes out, I think. If it goes through, straight through, there won't be a phase shift. But the medium of glass slows light down. So in a sense, that's the same thing as this phase shift. Depending on how thick the glass is, that's going to equal a phase shift. So like I said in the last video, there's nothing, you know, the guy said this is so simple. There's nothing simple about any of this mechanics. But anyway, at least this explains why the lines are so even, the dark lines. It's because the dark lines are just representing the fact that when you have the reflections, there's this part, this space, and this space will be consistent, where this length space, how long it takes to go down and back up, can be inconsistent, I think. Yeah. Yeah. I have to think about it, but yes. So anyway, that just explains some of it. Why? So that's why it's not really Newton's rings. It's not really a typical interference pattern. It's not an interference pattern in the same sense that Newton's rings is, or in the same sense that, well, it might be in some sense the way Newton's rings is, so I shouldn't say that. But it's not like the two-slit experiment. These lines aren't the same, they're not being formed by the same phenomenon as in the two-slit experiment, or the single slit. This is all a byproduct of reflections and refractions, mostly reflecting off the internal surfaces of the glass. So things that are, in the layer between the glass. So the layers, every layer is doing it. The glass is reflecting off both surfaces, and any other surface in between them, the air, it's also bouncing between the two layers of glass. And then we place this big piece, kind of kills anything going down because they put black underneath it, so it's absorbent. But some light, I guess, would go all the way through this glass and come back up also. So it's fairly complicated to follow all the pieces. So I will play around with with trying to create layers of glass, and with the thin film in between that I do happen to have, and you know, that'll perhaps be helpful in terms of creating a better understanding. Here's a little piece of the filum. See, but you can see it's very reflective at some angles. So if you get the angles correct, it's, you know, it can work as beam splitter. So between two layers of glass, this should work pretty much as a mirror. And maybe if I take 2 or 3 or 4, apparently if you use a few thin layers, you can create something very highly reflective. So it's really just trying to create something that's 50-50. So you can sort of see when you turn, it's almost like a polarizer. When you turn it halfway, see how much darker it's getting? Because it's reflecting back down that image. So it's not going through, it's being reflected back in. So I'll try to capitalize on that. Hopefully, see if the same effect goes this way. I can really tell you which way the lines go. See, the image almost disappears. So the lines must be going this way, lengthwise. Because you get less effect here. You have to go quite a high angle before you start wiping it out altogether. Where this way, you can, I don't know, maybe it's not that big a difference. Yeah, it's really dim there, about, at a 45-degree angle it's a substantial change from this. And that change is the light coming off the table reflecting off the back of the surface. So anyway, I'll updates as I get them and such. So I guess that's it for this. I don't know if there's anything else I need to go over. But that really does explain a lot about why the pattern isn't what I had thought it was, and I don't think it's what most people think it is. The pattern isn't being created by interference in the air, as the two beams are recombined, so to speak. It's happening in the beam splitter. So, I guess that'll be enough. I don't know if there's any comments worth reading, but maybe we'll see. We'll find comments, see if there's any comments. So these Sandra Jim Jones, that's a weird name. She's just talking about the Jimmy Bright Insight, the guy who did the video I critiqued on Tesla, so I guess all the Tesla nuts keep going to that video. But anyway, now they have conspiracy theories about a conspiracy theory nut. But anyway, says people are just crazy. So I don't get it. Ken seemingly berates his viewers, or at least that's the impression. And I get, and then in the description he asks for donations. So yeah, you could start off saying, hello, my brain dead moron viewers. Yeah, knuckle dragging, brain dead. Yeah, well, anyway, it's kind of funny. So I thought this was a funny one here. It's got the icon of pink panties with the triangle going the wrong way. Yeah, sure, Richard. Amend them in ignorance about the ether and its theory. Question mark. I think it's a God theory, alright? The whole idea of blaming some, saying there's a phenomenon and you're just basically saying it came out of the ether. It's like when a magician pulls a rabbit out of his hat and you idiots are sitting in the background going, there must be an ether full of rabbits. I mean, it's just that kind of a stupid conclusion in my opinion. So yeah, it's just in my opinion. If you had some really big pile of evidence to support your ether theory, well then I'd say there's some reason to go there. But the only evidence is you made it up. And, yes, of course it answers the question because you can put anything in the ether. The ether's magic space. It's just not my choice to resort to magical explanations when you haven't tried rational ones, like the magician has a rabbit under the table, taped under the table. Shit. Alright, particularly about nothing and what it means in science and math. Where you say that scientists, rational people, think nothing means something, and I think that's illogical. So you don't seem to understand that if you're going to use a word like space, for most people, space indicates nothing. It doesn't indicate something. And if you think it's something, then yes, call it something. But don't sit there and tell me I have to believe in your something because you do. Oh, it's just stupid. A zero is a zero. So I don't even know why you bring up math in this. When somebody says zero, they don't mean, oh no, I mean 0.0114. I don't mean zero. What is not grasped, fuck you, is that nothing has massive scalar potential. Some more nonsense about magical energy waves for which there's no evidence of existing. So it is not really nothing. Says you and no fact. First, the math demands negative structure. No, it doesn't. I.e., structure within a real value. And no, it doesn't. If I have a something in the something space and it has a value of 1, and all the space around it has a value of 0, then I have something that has a value 2. Well, I can understand the difference between the thing with a value 2 and the thing with a value 1 and the thing that has no value. Where's the complexity in math? There's no obligation to create non-zero zeros. Second, this background potential energy is evident in the ground state of atoms. Says you again. And again, I'm the one arguing there is background energy, but it's not in the nothing. It's not nothing that has the energy. They're little bits separated by nothing. Little bits separated by nothing, like photons. Idiot. Which will not stop moving for some reason, right? Yes, I believe that little bits can have something called perpetual motion. That is, you don't destroy them, the photons, and no matter where they go, they're going to come out a photon again sooner or later. They just keep going, and they don't stop, because there is an input from somewhere which the math deals with. Well, again, says you. There's no math that deals with it. So fuck that vacuous declaration of a truth. Show me your math that deals with it. Show me your ether math. Third, the fact was scientifically, oh here we go, realized in the Tesla years. What Tesla years? But where were the Tesla years actually? I mean, you could just explain to me. Tesla always seemed to be off years. I mean, he was too late to do the, and too stupid apparently to understand what the what the project was with the Marconi thing. So he got left out there. And like I say, made an innovation to Edison's motors, you know, but, you know, well, whatever. Fourth, the Geloland or particle pressure Eminem talks about is the ether. So again, you're saying particle pressure would behave the same as whatever, pressurized jello. Okay, fine, but then quantize your pressurized jello. Mine quantizes into the force that moves just a little tiny, moves electrons a little tiny bit. How does your ether do that? How does your jello do that? And the same goes for across the language of physics. Well, that was just a piece of useless poetry because none of the same goes across the language of physics. It means nothing. You see those tiny jelly particles of whatever you want to call them are outside normal time and space. Get it? No, there's nothing outside of normal time and space. That's why those little bits move the speed of light. It's because they're not outside of the restrictions, idiot. They are like an ether that permeates the matter, and that's it. Therein lies the rub. That says nothing. Thank you for saying nothing. Anyone can find out what this is all about by doing any homework at all on Tesla. Well, why don't you show us the homework on Tesla page? Please. Steinman's mostly talked about electricity. Maxwell's equations are known, but Maxwell There's very little published where Maxwell explains how ether works, because Maxwell was frustrated because he couldn't make it work. So he's probably a really bad example. So I don't know how Bearden is, or Whitaker, or Dullard is a dullard. Show me the brilliant science done by Dullard. And you will find out that to these men nothing is entirely full of something. Yes, to them, but but they don't have any evidence to demonstrate it. So again, where's your evidence? Is it in fact a shadow of real potential? That doesn't even make any sense. And merely called nothing when observed from here and now? Yes, there is a here and a now, and there will be a tomorrow and a then, and maybe tomorrow I won't be exactly in the same position, same location. I certainly won't be in total space in the same location, and your end of the time wake, whatever that means. And you will find out that this has been proven over and over again on the lab bench. So again, all these statements, you have evidence and proof, no doubt. You're saying you have proof of something. And again, I haven't seen a shred of evidence, not one single piece of evidence, as well as the math papers. I certainly haven't seen any of those. The ether math. For the main example, let it be remembered that the very reason that Steinmetz wrote his seminal math on this problem was because machines need to be changed due to dangerous failures. So again, that's somehow relevant. And change those machines were into new machines that now deliver us electric power on the national grids. Well, again, Edison built the first generator, retard. So, it's just stupid. This whole, yes, we've been able to figure out how to get rid of heat and vibrations and different irritants. But, there's no magic to it. There wasn't any ether theory that made that possible. Nobody did the special ether math and came out with a solution that, oh, here, this is how you can make a better ball bearing. Before S, those machines were blowing up. He fixed them by applying ether theory. Oh, you have no evidence of that whatsoever. Nothing. His own version of it, no less a theory that says that electricity flows through the adjoining space outside the wires, not through the interiors. Well, again, that's not an ether. You don't need an ether theory to understand why that happens, because the electrons are on the outside. So to say that the theory of science on the free electrons, so to say that theory and science on this ether problem are some kind of kooky, wacky, pseudo whatever, is just laziness. No, leading to confusion. No, you're the people who are preposterously lazy and exaggerating. You keep claiming you've demonstrated something, that you have proven something. You haven't one shred of evidence. I mean, who can really have a pop at Tesla, really? A pop at him for what? Saying insanely stupid and crude things about Einstein? Yeah. He liked Edison. I mean, he really didn't say anything all that bad about Edison, frankly, for a guy who was supposed to be all butthurt. I mean, the guy got all sorts of government contracts to build this and that. He got all sorts of them? No, he got money from very rich people. So again, you can say he got government contracts. Where's the evidence of that? Show me the evidence of a government contract Tesla got. But anyways, Einstein said, instead of ether, we could as well talk about physical qualities of space. Well, we already know Einstein's full of shit, in my opinion, on his made-up space, too. So why do I have a conversation about either dumb idea? Space. Quantities by definition outside physical norms, hence the problem, hence the argumentation is valid, and no one ought to be putting you off the ether. So assuredly, I don't even know what that means, but I clearly find the logic of your more complex universe under the silly, dumb universe we see in space, right? The universe, in its real forces, is revealed in outer space. That's what the universe does. And this little layer of complex chemistry is interesting, but that's not really the fundamental mechanics in the universe. And there's no evidence of your ether moving planets or galaxies or any of that shit. Personally, I believe that philosophical materialism, oh, here we go again. This isn't about philosophy, asshole, but whatever. Literally hates the argument because counter space, yeah, again, so counter nothing. So instead of saying something, you're going to say something is stupid, it's counter space. You think that's logical. You can't say something like counter ether? I don't know. Say something? You have to say something as stupid as counter space. Potentially lets mystics, spirit notions, and God into physics. Something it will not abide at any cost. I think it's already abided it plenty, in terms of they've already broken up this idea that, oh yes, we have randomness and photons don't know where they are, and so there's no cause and effect, because it's not just that we can't know where they are, they don't know where they are. Nobody can know where they are. Alright, and then some silly person, Laura Raymer. What dope you sound like. I mean, it's just so, what is that, a NASCAR hat you're wearing? I mean, geez, you just can't be dopier, alright, than to say something, what dope you sound like. Bright insight is very informative, and you are wrong. Better check it again. Dip Tesla. Again, I guess that was dip, and then she means period. Tesla was taken advantage of, yes. Yeah, right. He shouldn't have been obliged to work for people. That's terrible. Nobody should have to work for a company. No bullshit. Edison was doing the animals a favor by killing them, please. Well, okay, don't bother with the facts then, right? The elephant he electrocuted was going to be shot because it had killed a couple of circus employees. All the animals he killed were strays that were going to be euthanized. So you just don't like the truth? Is that it? And you suck at constructive criticism. And guess what? You suck even worse. And that's just ironic. Pitiful people. So anyway, so Maxim Murr said, the slit shape showing off the diffraction effects difference of even and odd-sided openings also demonstrates why photographers interested in starburst effects with street lights or the sun always want an odd number of aperture blades to form the opening. Yeah, I don't know. I guess you can know that somehow or other. I guess maybe you can look inside the camera and see what an F4 looks like or something. In fact, I thought that is what you were showing in the illustration. Well, it is the same thing. I mean, I may have been showing camera apertures, but it's the same effect. I mean, it's clearly that's supposed to be the interference, pattern. I mean, the Huygens created divergence. Look, that expansion and contraction arguments was made to be as simple as possible, and you still fail to follow it. Yeah, because you think it's simple and it's not. Yes, the effect gets multiplied. Well, says you. I say it gets canceled, and it's totally irrelevant. Again, these two legs. Well, I'm not going to open the drawing thing just to say it again, but the two legs are going in opposite directions. It really doesn't matter if this one goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and does all kinds of jerky shit, because the only thing that's really going to matter is the distance change. And the point is if it travels more distance and it travels less distance, and then more distance and less distance, it's all going to add up to be the same in the end. But whatever. You could show the math. I could show the math. Well, again, the math is only useful if you have the proper theory. So again, they have math for the two-slit and the single-slit experiment, but we already know that the math is dependent on the assumption of Huygens and Heisenberg. And without those assumptions, the math doesn't work. But I know you won't give an earnest look into it and unjustly dismiss it as mush. Again, first you have to model the structure before you can do the math. I'm just saying there's no way to do the math until you understand that, you know, the mirror part especially, that when the light goes this way and this mirror comes at it this way, and then the light goes back this way and this mirror is escaping this way, okay, that those are going to be exactly the same. That's the same thing. You can't create more out of that. What you took away going one direction, it's going to give back going the opposite direction. That's just a conservation argument. You can't undo the conservation argument. Anyway, yeah, here's the video of a conference by Logo. Yeah, so that's just the original video, you know, that I intended to play anyway. So, yeah, but thanks for posting the link. But yeah, I already have that page loaded. I just haven't, just tedious listening to those. You know, I just don't, you know, I hate to call people dishonest, but yeah, first cosmic event seen in gravitational waves and light. Yeah, that's it. So I do have it loaded. I just I've gotten through 13 minutes and I just was like, you know, they were doing all this bullshit. We're proving Einstein right. It's the exact theory. Einstein attempted to publish a paper saying, no, that can't happen. So, again, you know, there's so much to this thing that's just, it's so dirty in terms of the little tricks played. Like I said, going from 10 to the minus 44 as an energy event to 10 to the minus 22 with merely mathematical gimmicks. You know, cut the problem in half, and you know, so then you can make it more workable as a fantasy. So anyway, went on longer than I thought I would, and not on the same subject. So sorry about that. But it's late. Got a late start. Ubuntu. Yeah, Ubuntu. You know, don't like it. Anyway, Jesus. I don't know, the simple things they had, it's so broken. You know, just try to load it on your computer and it tries to erase every hard drive you have on the computer. And it's just little stupid things. They're just really annoying. But anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, I'm done. Yeah, that's it. So, good night, Gracie and such. Till next time. Blah blah blah. Blah blah blah.